Jonathan, and welcome to the final episode in our Little Shop of Horrors miniseries on every version ever. You know how they say you should save the best for last? Well, we did not do that. If you couldn't tell, my favorite was in the last episode. No, today Nikki and I are talking about probably the least memorable version of this story, or maybe the most memorable for reasons other than how good it is. Some might even say this is the worst version. I won't say that. I try to be positive, but after the musical, this one is kind of a step down. Today we're talking about 1991's Little Shop. Not Little Shop of Horrors, just Little Shop. This is an animated series for kids, which seems like a very strange direction to take for a franchise about a man-eating plant. But if you can't tell from the title, this version has been scrubbed clean from almost all its horror elements. I will say, though, that even if this isn't the best version, it's still rather interesting to me, if only for the fact that it's faded into obscurity.
I want to go to the little shop. Word, little shop.
Did you know that this show existed before we started talking about these?
I feel like when I was a kid, I probably saw it advertised, but generally I did not know about it. But like there were bits that came up and they looked familiar to me, so I might have watched it as a kid and not you don't make the connection as an adult. Because there was other stuff that there was one episode that had advertisements on it that I ran across, and it's oh wow, that looks really familiar. I remember seeing that or this or whatever. So in the deep kid recesses of my brain, I probably did, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't think I'd ever seen this. I don't think I knew it existed until I started reading about the movie, the musical.
Right.
And then I was really intrigued. It was like, how do I watch this?
Carefully.
It's available on YouTube if anyone decides they really want to see this.
Yeah, it's actually a really all the episodes are cut exactly the same. Yeah, it's all in one playlist if you just Google or YouTube Little Shop. And it's not Little Shop of Horrors. It's just Little Shop.
Yeah. It's not horrific because it's a children's show.
Well, that's up for debate, but sure, we'll go with that.
Yeah, all of the horror elements seem to have been removed. It's a very sanitized version of either the original or the musical. And
yeah.
It's still a musical though, except it's mostly rap because the plant raps all the time.
Yeah. Well, I was looking and I think, and this is just I should have kept a tally, but I started, but then I didn't continue it. There was kind of an interesting mix of each episode, or at least to some extent, had that kind of 50s bebop type music.
Yeah.
Something poppy and then something rap oriented.
Yeah, it was just a weird mix of styles.
Yeah. But considering they were trying to hit something from the 60s with the original, and then they were trying to hit something from the 80s with the pop, and then I'm guessing trying to hit that for then modern sensibilities with the rap.
Yeah.
And that intro, oh my god. I mean, and I guess it was I guess I didn't look into it, but for that time, that was almost a minute open as far as the opening.
It took a long time.
Yeah, it was 59 seconds from, when it came on to when it finished up. And it didn't really, obviously if you listen to the lyrics, you're going to get the idea of what it's about. But it really didn't tell you anything about the show. Yeah,
no, I don't think any child going into this would know what the show is about or based on.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially from the song, but just the 90s, probably 80s and 90s were a weird time where anything could get a cartoon.
Oh, yeah.
Including Little Shop of Horrors.
Well, RoboCop had a cartoon, and he actually had action figures. And I know that was more of a 90s thing, you think all the Batman movies had even though they were PG-13 and I guess they were all PG-13. They catered, even though the kids couldn't see the movies, they could still get the toys.
Mm-hmm.
Though I doubt this probably had toys.
I don't think so. The only toys I've ever seen related to Little Shop of Horrors are Funko Pops, which
Yeah.
I kind of want an Audrey 2 Funko Pop.
We'll see if we can make it happen. You definitely deserve one after going through all three of these.
This one especially.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely so.
If it had just been like one episode, it would have been fine. But like 13, I was tired of this by the end.
Yeah. Yeah, it was there were parts of it that I looked at and was like, "Oh, well that's clearly, speaking to the 60s one and that's clearly talking to the 80s one." And oh
Mm-hmm.
look, here's the flower eating character. He shows up a couple times and
He
I
kind of
didn't
shows
know.
up a lot. Like he's in the
Yeah.
background of episodes. Like one time he like I think there's a guy who has flowers growing out of his head, and in the background it looked like he ate the flowers off the guy's head. But then they
Yep.
were back in another scene.
Right, right. And then he was like on the Halloween episode, he shows up as one of the houses they go to. According to one of the wiki pages, and again, I guess you kind of take the wiki pages for what they are, but they were
Mm-hmm.
talking about how there was a character that resembled Jack Nicholson in quite a few different of the episodes.
I saw that fact, but I don't know which one they were talking about.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I guess I wasn't paying attention to like
Yeah.
look for his character. But even like the idea that the bully kid, Pain Driller, why
Mm-hmm.
didn't they just have the dentist character as a kid? Like that would have been I don't know. Like the rest of it, they tried to pull in, you've got Audrey as Mr. Moshnick's daughter. You've got different characters that show up in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
Seymour's mom shows up, but she's for some reason always working out.
Yeah, you
Um,
never see her face. She's one of those characters who's like her head is right off the top of the screen.
yeah, exactly. You see like legs and butt, and that's kind of it.
At first, I thought that she was going to be in the first episode, and then you never see her again. But then, towards the end of the season, she shows up a few times,
Yeah, yeah.
and I was very confused as to where Seymour lived because it seemed like he was living in the shop, but his
Yeah, I
mother
thought that
wasn't
at
around.
first too. Yeah, exactly. I thought that at first too, but it didn't seem like it was the case. And his bed was like, I don't know, like 12 feet off the ground. It was like bunk beds, but he was 12 feet off the ground.
Yeah.
And Audrey's like every episode she wants to be something else. Like her overriding arc is she wants to be a fireman when she grows up.
Mm-hmm.
But then she takes little side trips, and it seems like every other episode she wanted to be something different. And I suppose it was supposed to be empowering for girls at back in the 90s, but it was such a weird mix of things.
Yeah.
That and the giant bow on her head, I got nothing there. Holy crap.
Yeah, they didn't really feel like the characters from the movies to me. Maybe Mr. Mushnick did,
A little bit, I guess. Yeah.
but Audrey seemed totally different. Seymour was similar, but
Yeah. Well, I think with Audrey they were probably trying to play her up as a because you don't really need a ditzy 13-year-old or 12-year-old or whatever she was.
I
That
think they were
character.
supposed to be 13, but they seemed younger.
Yeah, yeah, and Seymour was I don't know. It's a kid character. It's meant to be at other kids, but there wasn't a lot to. I guess towards the end you kind of got to like him a little bit better, but at the start it just was like okay. The thing that made Seymour good in the movies was he was still likable.
Hmm.
You felt for him. He's trying to do the right thing. He just didn't seem to have any. And I guess we're judging a cartoon from the '90s, but it's just like there's still that he was just there. There wasn't any like,
Yeah,
oh, I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go there to do this.
he was just kind of boring to me.
Yeah. And when he faced forward, like the way his face was, like
Yeah.
like they took a circle out and that was his mouth. Oh my god.
Yeah, the designs of the characters were not that great.
Yeah.
They were like the epitome of cheap animation. Like they made it as simple as they could so that they could get the animation out quickly,
Agreed. Very much so.
and nobody looked that great. Some looked really bad, like the dentist.
Oh my god. Yeah, they didn't have noses.
No, he looked like some sort of, I don't know, monster. like a Frankenstein monster type thing.
Oh yeah. It was, I don't know, it was like a weird kind of like it sort of gave me like Charlie Brown vibes, especially I mean like Seymour especially just, he was kind of the kid that's down on his luck, never gets his
Yeah.
way kind of a thing. Some of the
Mm-hmm.
animation reminded me of that a little bit, but I don't know. Like yeah, you could definitely tell like even to see the open of the show, you get the idea of how relatively cheap it is. Like nothing like
Mm-hmm.
as compared to having things colored separately, you've got these giant patches of color. Like the little shop was, like three different colors, but it's like squares of color.
Yeah, it seemed like they were trying to go for an like 60s Looney Tunes vibe, but they
Yeah, that
didn't
is
do a very
very
good
true.
job.
Yeah, it was very much that aesthetic. I'd even say something like Ed, Ed and Eddie kind of had a similar feel. Like it
I
wasn't
only saw a
rough,
little bit of
but
that. I don't remember much of it.
yeah, I don't. My nieces used to watch it, and yeah, it kind of made yeah. Anyway, yeah, it kind of follows that same feel, but I did kind of get the impression that like the designs of the city itself kind of gave me like the opening of the '60s version vibes,
Yeah, I
like
could see that.
that kind of
Yeah,
sketched feel. Like it
yeah,
doesn't feel professional; it feels like it belongs in that era.
yeah. It did seem similar, but again, not as good.
Yeah, no, agreed. I did really like the Greek chorus as flowers. I think that worked pretty well.
Yeah, I figured that they were trying to go for that those three characters,
Mm-hmm.
Crystal, Ronette, and
Chiffon.
yeah. I thought that's who the flowers were supposed to be.
I think so too. Although sometimes there was a fourth one,
Oh, that's true.
and sometimes I think there might have even been five at some points. But I suppose that's kind of pedantic when you consider the overall,
Yeah, I guess it wasn't like a one-to-one thing. That's just the same idea.
Yeah, yeah. It's basis more than anything else. It's like Audrey being Mushnick's daughter.
Yeah, I don't. I guess the only reason that they did that is so that they'd have a reason for her to be hanging around the flower shop. Because otherwise, it would be weird if a little girl was just there.
Yeah, that's very true.
But other than that, it did seem weird, a weird thing to change.
Yeah, yeah, that it was that, and the fact that Audrey too, or sorry, the fact that Audrey Jr. was a seedling from 200 million years ago in the Vegozoic era, as compared to
Yeah, there was a lot of weird. I don't. Is that a pun? Like
that's a pun.
wordplay
Oh yeah,
puns. There was a lot of that in this
oh yeah.
show.
And honestly, a lot of that was not bad. Like I was
Yeah.
impressed by some of it. Like there was Seymour was constantly being referred to as a potato. Like he'd be like, "Oh, potatoes have better eyes than you for various things." And
Yeah, they had some clever puns mixed in with some dumb jokes.
oh yeah, yeah. I will say though that their pun play was excellent from that respect.
Yeah, there was a few that I thought was clever and did actually make me laugh. Like
Yeah.
the show on a whole is just kind of meh, but it had moments.
Oh yeah, very much so. And there was some really solid ones. Like um and they had some, I mean, as it went along, Seymour did kind of the lesson thing you get with a lot of kid shows of that
Mm-hmm.
era,
Yeah.
but it was self-aware enough. I mean, you had a lot of fourth wall breaks to start with, but it was self-aware enough to say, we're trying to have this message of environmentalism or treating people with respect, even though it was played off as, oh, that's, why are you rambling about, things like this? But it did come back to that to some extent. So they did it in a clever way, as much as one could, for something in like from that era.
Yeah, there was one that I thought it was getting a little. I don't know. It almost seemed like it was going to be heavy-handed. It was towards the end of the episode where he's suddenly good at a bunch of sports,
Ah,
and
yeah.
it seemed like they were going to have a lesson about, I don't know, cheating or something like that. Because I don't even remember how it happened, but they were sort of merged. The
Yeah.
Seymour and the plant were sort of merged, and suddenly he was great at sports.
Yeah. Seymour Junior wanted feet or wanted to be able to walk. And
Yeah,
so he merged himself with Seymour accidentally, and
I don't.
they never
I,
really go
they
into
didn't
the
really
how.
explain it well because I was confused.
Probably better not to. It seemed like he ended up in Seymour's stomach, but it kind of became like the man with two heads, kind of.
Yeah, because he kept popping out his head and vines and
Yep.
yeah. But when they get separated, it seemed like he was going to have some sort of a lesson about cheating because it was sort of like he was cheating. And I thought he was going to end up learning that lesson. And he was giving him this speech about how all he needed was confidence. He didn't need to be merged with Junior at all. So then he was going to run in the race. And I thought he was going to end up losing. And then that was going to be the big moral of the story. But then Junior cheated again by tying up all the shoelaces of the other people's. And then I'm not sure if he won or not because like he got trampled at the finish line. So I'm not even sure what the overall moral of that episode was.
Well, Seymour came out on the bottom, so as he would have normally. At the beginning, at the very first episode, they kind of say that Seymour is supposed to be a nerd, but he's lacking the brains to be a nerd. So he's kind of striving to be a nerd, but that never really comes up again. So I don't know if they were just trying to give him like, oh, well, this is the personality type of our hero.
Yeah, because later on it seems like everybody just calls him a nerd, and he seems to be sort of smart. So I'm not really sure where they were going with that.
I don't know that they did either.
Probably not.
Yeah, basically.
I thought it was funny too in the first episode when he finds the seed. When it sprouts, he already has a little pot.
That's right. He germed in the wheat germ. He germinated in the wheat germ.
Which apparently grows a little clay pot for him to live in.
Oh yeah. Well, plants of the Vegezoic era were well known for their variety of pots. You could actually tell a plant's status by its pot.
Oh, okay. Well, what is his status then? A little clay
I don't
pot.
know. I haven't done enough research into, making up things for that era. We never actually go back to then. We only go to the Skid Row Botanical Gardens. Which that was another kind of fun thing was the fact that it was like the world, not that you can call it world building, but you had like the Skid Row Botanical Gardens, the Skid Row Consolidated Elementary or Junior High, I guess it was. Like then there was like the little shop of heads and the Skid Row not very interesting museum, and you had all these places. I don't know. They were kind of like that part of it was kind of fun.
It was like Skid Row was a lot more affluent than it was in the original versions.
Oh yeah,
They had a lot more going on.
When it's the only place that exists. They even had a subway.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, why would Skid Row have a subway?
Because it's more affluent than what we initially thought.
Yeah, apparently.
We just get the bad side of Skid Row. Actual Skid Row is actually quite nice. And it was named for Mr. Skid Anita Row.
Okay.
I don't know. The self-awareness that Seymour has is because he's always like he's doing his own narrations by and large. And he does like so many fourth wall breaks throughout.
Yeah.
In the first episode, you talk about like random, like weird little side things. They go visit the Warhol, or they go by the Warhol soup factory, and that's kind of seems like a throwback to Andy Warhol with
I didn't notice that. That's hilarious.
It is good, but there's things like that kind of scattered throughout, like the fire station. It says never closes or something like that, or we never close, or something along those lines.
I think they did hide some good jokes in the backgrounds.
They did very much. Well, and it goes to show you that they did cover a lot of the cheeky kind of nature of like the original movie. Like even the newspaper is called the Daily what was it? Like the Daily Fish Wrap or something like that, because they used to wrap newspaper in fish when they gave it to people.
Yeah. So, what did you think of this take on Audrey 2, or in this case, Junior?
I think for a kid-friendly audience, I don't know that there was a lot else you could have done. He was rather rude, Like Seymour's only friend is also quite a bully, really.
Yeah,
Like anything that he did for Seymour, it was for his own gain
yeah,
in a lot of ways. But to some extent, like I think that you couldn't play Junior as like a sweet character. That I mean, there was a lot of
no,
stuff that was
no, yeah,
changed, but it kind of still had to have some of that edge.
yeah,
And a lot of times, Seymour and Junior's, they wanted they wanted different things, but the same course of action led them to those things.
yeah. I didn't really think of him as a bully, but now that you mention that, he kind of is. He's a different kind of bully than the main bully, Pain
Right.
Driller.
I mean, he's more of a, I don't want to say sadistic, but he's kind of like, he takes advantage of situations.
Yeah, he's just selfish, kind of.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, actually. Like, he's his own self, on the Halloween episode, he wants to get all the pumpkins to the cemetery because, he's
They
got
need to
this.
rest in peace because the humans
Yes,
killed them.
exactly. That's kind of a reoccurring theme throughout is he was put off by the fact that vegetables were put in soup or that pumpkins were used for carving or trees were turned into paper and stuff.
And the one episode where he's like trying to rescue all the town's newspapers. I'm not sure what his end goal was because you can't turn them back into trees, but he thought he needed to save them.
Right. But then on the other side, there was an episode where he falls in love with a Venus flytrap, and he gets upset that it's covered in flowers, and he's so upset that the plant won't or the Venus flytrap won't talk to him. And then at the end, all the flowers are taken off of this flytrap, and he's like, "Oh, you're not so pretty without your flowers." What did you think of Mushnik in this?
Um, he was fine. Kind of annoying.
Uh-huh.
He was probably the most like his characters in the other two versions.
Yeah, he reminded me more, and not that there's a ton of difference between him in the '60s and the '80s version, but he felt he felt closer to the '80s version, I think. Like he didn't have quite
Yeah.
the range that the '60s one had.
Yeah, it was like he was closer to the 80s version but with the 60s version's voice.
Yes, very much.
And I actually read that the guy who played him in the 60s wanted to voice him for this cartoon, but
Oh,
there was like I think the production for this cartoon took place in Canada, and so all the voice actors had to be from Canada.
that
So
makes sense.
he couldn't do it, but he wanted to be the voice of Mushnek again.
I could see that it would be a really interesting role. You could definitely tell some of the voices like they were people that did a lot of other voice work.
Yeah. I think you get that with a lot of cartoons.
Oh yeah, very much so. Like each era has those voices that just stand out to you.
Yeah.
Apparently, Roger Corman was a creative consultant on this too.
Yeah, I read that, and I think that they even talked to Frank Oz a bit as
Oh,
well.
nice. No, it makes sense, I think. I mean, because you're still going to have parents watching this, and it's going to be more the parents that are going to say, oh, hey, I recognize this property from when I was, 5 years ago, or, when I was a kid or whatever.
Yeah, I guess the musical probably it was only 5 years because this was 91 and the musical
Yep.
was 86.
Yep. Exactly. Which is weird to think about. Like, it's about, like, so they made a horror movie based off of the Banana Splits, which was like a '60s and '70s, like, show.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what made you think to do Little Shop, 5 years after it was a thing?
It's kind of the opposite approach because they took. I mean, Little Shop of Horrors is not exactly a horror movie; it just has horror elements. But they took a quote unquote horror movie and made it into a cartoon, and then this other thing they took a cartoon and made it into a horror movie.
Very, very true. Well, again, though, it's like, I mean, they turned it so much stuff into cartoons back in that era.
Yeah, I think most of them I probably never watched or wasn't allowed to watch.
Well, with some of them, you weren't missing much,
No,
if I remember
probably not.
correctly.
We didn't really have TV around this time, anyways.
Oh, no worries.
I think we didn't get TV until somewhere between when I was 6 and 8, maybe, and I would have only been 5 when this show came out.
Okay. Well, and
And we
this was
only had
probably a
like 4 or
little.
5 channels.
Yeah, this would have been on Fox, so it probably would have been on your basic, 4 channels. So, but
I
this was
think
definitely not for a 5-year-old. I don't think. I mean, traditionally, it wouldn't be for a 5-year-old.
no, probably not. Fox was one that I think we had, but we didn't know we had it. And
Ah,
it was like years. I think I was like somewhere between 10 and 12, maybe. And we were just like flipping through all the static channels, and we discovered
wow, what a
so,
discovery!
we discovered 2 new channels, which was Fox and at the time the WB.
Oh,
And that
nice.
was like the most exciting thing, and we got to watch Animaniacs after that, and that was like my
Oh,
favorite show at the time.
oh, Animaniacs was just amazing. Regardless, like you can go back and watch it now, and it's just as good as
Yeah,
what it was then. I imagine something like this, like if you watched it as a kid, you'd go back and be like, "Ugh, I liked this when I was a kid, but my tastes have changed."
yeah, yeah. This one doesn't have as much staying power as the Animaniacs.
No, definitely not. I mean, the thing is, if you sit down, I think if you sit down and binge it, you can see the good. But if you were to just sit down and watch like 1 or 2 episodes,
Hmm.
I like the music, I think is pretty solid. I think they did a good job with a lot of that, and it does stay true to a lot of what the original was. But
Hmm.
without that connotation, I don't think it would have like what it needs.
Yeah, probably. The music was sometimes it was good, but it was kind of a mixed bag because some of it was kind of cheesy.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
it was like they had a quota to fill of songs, and they just forced themselves to write songs to fill in the gaps.
true. That's very true. But also, I mean, I don't write music. I don't know a lot about like that aspect. But
Yeah,
God, I couldn't even imagine trying to write music, much less cranking out that many songs.
yeah, that's true. They can't all be winners, and they did have some good in there, so you
Yeah,
can't be
very
too
much
hard
so.
on them in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the music was probably the strongest part of what they did. That and the puns.
Probably because the art was not very strong.
No, not even remotely. Well, when you've got like the bully, Pain, the bully, like changing sizes here and there and everywhere,
Yeah, that's true.
and the constant referring back, I guess it was of the time, but the constant referring back to Seymour as a weenie. It's like that. I mean, that was kind of the go-to phrase, I'm sure, at that point, but it was just a little, it got to be a little much. It's like, oh, he's a weenie. Okay, this is like the 5th time this episode you said that. Find a different insult.
I did notice that. I guess that probably is an of the times insult, but they
Oh
did
yeah,
use it a lot.
they did. Well, even I think it was the 2nd or 3rd episode, they're riding on a bus and it says Seymour is a weenie and graffiti on the side.
It was probably that bully. He probably
More
did
than
it.
likely. More than likely. I think it pops up like that pops up a couple of other times in graffiti throughout. I'd have to I'm not going back to watch it, but I'm pretty sure at least one other time it showed up.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Repeat gags.
What did you think of the bully overall?
He could do more with really, really extensive dental work than any other character I've ever seen in the history of cartoons.
Yeah, he maneuvered his dental piece in such ways that I think anyone else who tried that would be permanently disfigured.
Oh yeah.
He like would shoot things out of his like he used it as a slingshot. Like he would pull it back, and I think he did it to Seymour.
Several times, yeah.
And I guess this is a cartoon, but still, that's ridiculous.
And the fact it was only attached to his front 2 teeth.
Yeah, they must. He just must have 2 really bad front teeth, and the rest are fine.
Oh yeah, well, definitely so. It was kind of interesting to see a bully with that big a dental work. Like normally you wouldn't see that in a bully character, especially one that's supposed to be very athletic.
That's true. Normally, they give the dental work to the kid who's getting picked on because it's a point that the bullies can use against them.
Exactly. They could also pick you up by your dental work and do like a slingshot across the room.
Yeah, except in this case, he just uses it as a slingshot to launch you across the
Exactly.
room.
Exactly. Well, he's thinking outside the box. Like the pun work in this show. What do you think of Junior's powers?
That was weird. I think that they're trying to base that on like the end of the '60s version where he hypnotizes Seymour into going and getting him food.
True.
Except this, he like would spit a seed at somebody, which he had whispered to the seed. He was planting a seed of an idea, and then he'd spit it at somebody, and then it would hypnotize them into doing whatever he whispered to the seed.
And dude's aim was not good until the very last episode, and even on the last episode, it didn't do what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, half the time he would hit somebody else, and then somebody else would do the wrong thing.
Yep. But I suppose that's like a reoccurring joke and thus funny or
Yes.
something. So
It was kind of annoying.
well, he also made Seymour fly at one point.
Oh, that's true because he had his other power was that
Like telepathy.
was it called vegetable magnetism? Like
Oh
he could
yeah.
he could tell plants what to do, and because shoes are rubber and rubber comes from a rubber tree, that means that he can control shoes apparently, and he made Seymour fly.
Yep.
Which is so ridiculous. It's like the longest reaching grasp of an idea, but it's a cartoon, so whatever.
Exactly. He also managed to take all the newspapers at the junkyard and like basically make a volcano of newspaper like go all over the town.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what was up with the newspaper. Was he controlling it, or was the newspaper supposed to be coming to life? Because it seemed like the newspaper was alive at one point.
I think it was supposed to be under his control, like bringing it all to town because fiber, tree fibers and stuff. But
Yeah.
I don't think it was supposed to be alive.
It probably wasn't. There was just so much that they didn't explain well enough, and I was just confused. But not confused enough that I cared to go back and rewatch it and figure it out.
Oh come on, a week or two down the road, those questions will eat away at you enough. You're going to go back and watch this entire thing.
I doubt it, because a week or two down the road, I'm probably going to completely forget about this.
Point taken. Touché.
Like, it took me a long time to get through this because I kept forgetting that I had to watch it.
Same boat.
Partly because it was just kind of boring. Like, it had its moments. It was entertaining at times, but I couldn't binge it.
Yeah.
It was too much to binge, and then I had to go work, and then I'd forget about it, and I'd watch something else when I got home from work, and then I'd remember, oh yeah, you got to watch that.
What you do for your audience, I tell you, I'm blown away.
Yeah, I think if I weren't covering every version of this, I think I would have given up after the first couple of episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I will say that having watched all 13, well, 12 and a half because of episode 9, I'm glad I watched it because you can see over the course of it, like the influences of the movies. And I think that it's done in such a way that if you know the base material, you're going to see more than just what's on the surface.
Yeah.
But it takes something to get there. And I don't, it's a dedication by people that know the material, which is great. But there's a lot of people that aren't going to know that or see that or remember that.
Yeah, in that respect, I am glad I watched it because I do like watching different versions of things just to see what people do with the different material.
Oh, yeah.
It's just some things are harder than others to get through.
Absolutely. And I don't know if it was just because that's what kids' entertainment was at that point, or if it was just, like we say, I don't want to say that it was rushed for the sake of rushing, and obviously there was that element, but I think a lot of cartoons, even now, are that way. But I hate to think that it was just rushed through because, it's a cash grab. It doesn't feel like a cash grab.
Yeah, I don't know. Little Shop of Horrors is kind of a cult classic, but was it popular enough that they thought that they were going to make a ton of money off turning it into a cartoon?
I don't know.
It doesn't feel like it would have been.
No, just given it's like, again, and I bring up RoboCop because easy example. Like RoboCop wouldn't be something that a kid is going to be able to watch. That's probably why they brought in the cartoon and toys and whatever else. With this, I do think that the musical, it definitely had its audience, And I think that the musical itself did pretty well, like the movie musical. So I would
Yeah,
assume that there would be that love of it, but I don't know. They could have just needed something to fill a gap.
maybe. And maybe it just had one guy who just loved Little Shop of Horrors and wanted to do something based on it.
It's possible too. I mean, you look at like say Saturday night content back when broadcast was a lot bigger, and I guess even to this day too. But you just needed those shows to fill in slots. Like, that one slot that doesn't do real well, but you got to throw something there. I'm assuming that to some extent that's what this was.
It could have been.
Like, you had the dedication of the people that knew and loved Little Shop, and they wanted to bring some version of that to the screen. And then Fox was like, okay, we'll give it a season. We'll only give it a season, but we'll give it a season.
Yeah. And you can tell that whoever made this, they did have affection for the originals, because there's a lot of in-jokes specifically towards both versions.
Very much.
So it's definitely not bad. It's just, it's not fully good either.
Yeah, it lacks focus, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And not that you need you don't need it to be, dramatic week to week drama where you're sitting on the edge of your seat waiting to know what happens next, but it's kind of all over the board. Like, even Seymour isn't really consistent as a character. One time he can, do science and do all this stuff, and then the next he's just a total idiot.
Yeah, that's true.
But I guess that's 13-year-olds too, so
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of. Oh, that was with the first episode. So Audrey wants to be a fireman, not a firefighter at that point, but a fireman, which for the time was probably still the proper term for that. But she pulls out a centerfold of a out of a firefighter magazine of like a really tall ladder. It's like probably 6 pages long.
That was a very weird joke.
It was for the time, yeah.
Did you notice in the final episode, like through this whole show, they've just had Junior be ravenous and eat tons of like everything, mostly meat, but like they wouldn't let him eat people. But in the last episode, he ate a person. Did you notice that?
I don't actually. Which one? Who did he eat?
Okay, in the last episode, the dentist's sister is going to marry Mr. Mushnick. It's long and complicated. It involves his magic seeds. But at the wedding, there's some guy playing the piano behind this screen. Like, you never see the guy, but you see Junior behind him. And then the camera's like off looking at someone else. And you hear a giant chomp. And then suddenly Junior is playing the piano. And he starts a song. So he ate the piano player.
That's awesome.
The only casualty of the show.
Yeah. Other than all those pumpkins and the newspapers.
Yeah.
And
the only human
Stu.
casualty.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, Stu, the vegetables. There was a weird joke in there too. Like they were making vegetable stew, and apparently the recipe was from Junior's grandmother, and he said Granny was a cannibal. That one made me laugh.
Oh yeah, that was pretty good. So they're trying to do basically Seymour gets put in home ec, and they have to do a recipe. So he's gonna do boiled water, but then Junior says, "Hey, we can do this recipe for my grandma." And basically all Junior wants to do is build a veggie person, and they need to find a brain. So it kind of turns into Frankenstein sort of. There's even like allusions between Igor and Seymour, and that's a reoccurring joke throughout the series. But yeah, they get the brain from this smart fridge, and he goes around trying to like freeze everything and get everything cold, which gets Junior frozen, and then they serve up stew as a stew for Junior.
I just thought of something. This show predicted smart fridges.
Oh my gosh, you're right. Holy crap.
Smart fridges weren't a thing in 1991.
Because also the first of Audrey's changing of her career. She wanted to be a fridge repair person.
That is a very weird and specific career choice.
Oh yeah. She has all these different sayings when she's gonna go do stuff. Like at one point she's gonna go be a milkman and Seymour asks her, well, what about being a fireman? And she goes, well, you can't put fire on cereal. There's so many weird little things like that.
Yeah. That one makes me laugh because it's so weird and random.
That is good though. It's awesome. That whole second episode though, because Seymour's taking home ec, he's considering himself, like everybody calls him, a weenie. But then at the end, he says something like, "A man can be anything he wants, even a girl," because he's taken the classes and stuff. And
I think he said something like, real men should learn everything they can, even if they have to learn it in home ec. That whole episode was based... They act like home ec is a class that only girls take, which I guess historically is sort of true.
If you go back to the 60s, I suppose, but by the 90s, I guess, and that's the mentality, like everything is written from a kid's perspective, like, or written from an adult perspective of when they were kids. And the folks writing this were probably kids in the,
That's true.
50s and 60s.
Yeah. But yeah, this whole episode was like just based on gender stereotypes.
Oh, massively so. Massively so.
I was thinking this would not get made today.
Not even remotely. I thought it was strange, like the titles of each episode, like they sort of related to what was going on, but like the second episode is called "Real Men Aren't Made of Quiche," and it didn't really like. Yeah.
I kept waiting for that one to make sense, but I don't think it ever fully made sense.
Most of them don't. Like they're just like a clever play on words, and that's kind of where it ends. It gives you kind of a general, okay, I Loathe a Parade is going to involve a parade.
Yeah. There were just a lot of weird puns, like back to the fuchsia.
Mm-hmm. I didn't even see fuchsia in that episode.
Yeah, I don't know why it was named that, actually. And if
Again,
they explained it, I missed it.
What'd you think of the nameplay? Like the crazy names, like Thespian Chinless and what was the dentist's name?
I can't remember the dentist's name, but I specifically wrote down his sister's name because I thought I recognized it at first, and then I had to look it up. Her name was Malaclusia.
Oh my goodness.
So I typed that in, trying to figure out what that was, because I knew I recognized the name, but different. It's from malocclusion, which means you have crooked teeth. And her brother is the dentist, so it's a tooth joke.
And that was actually a thing, and they didn't use all of them, but in the original Little Shop, there was like so many, the names that they were going to use for stuff and people, they didn't end up going with, but they did keep some of them, like the person that judges the plant contest that they're going to honor Seymour with. Mm-hmm. Like her name is about 7 syllables long, and like that play on names was big in the 60s one as well. So
yeah, they had some clever things in this, but the one that stood out to me most was Malaclusia.
Yeah. There was the scientist too, Midas Appalling.
Is that supposed to be like might is appalling?
Yeah, well, so his first name is Midas, Mightus. Last name Appalling, as in something awful.
Okay.
I guess it made more sense. Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't think there was anything. I think they just picked 2 names that were weird and put them together. But
it sounds like it should be a pun for something, and I can't figure out something that makes sense.
Me neither. Like, I get the basic idea of the joke, but I got nothing as to the actual thing. I mean, the thespian chinless, a lot of, like, these guys that think themselves grand, like they don't have, like, the good chins, and thespians are oftentimes people that are related to being in the theater and whatnot, so I don't know. Anyway. Random side note there.
I mean, this show is full of random side notes.
Oh God, it is. Well, and like you kind of get the two storylines going, and I know there's always most of the time there's an A and B plot,
Mm-hmm.
but like most of them involved Audrey as the B plot,
Mm-hmm.
and they never made sense. It's like,
No.
where is it going?
Yeah. I half the time it felt like they didn't even end. Like they just kind of stopped.
Yeah, basically, I would agree with that.
Like I couldn't figure out what the point of her wanting to be a sports writer was in the episode where by the end Junior has now become like a sports star, but like at the beginning he wasn't, and suddenly she wants to be a sports writer. And I don't know if they just did that so that the two stories would line up, because at the end she's like typing what's happening at the game. But there was no like real end to that. That's just what she's doing.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's kind of what the point of it was. Like, it was something to relate back to what the main story was. Like, she created the when she wanted to be a milkman, it was to make this giant home milk product thing. Because the thing that Junior came up with was supposed to be a home version of whatever thing.
I wonder if her wanting to be the milk person relates to the episode that was only in German, because I like it's only in German, so I watched it and just tried to figure out what was happening. It's called It's a Wonderful Leaf, so I think it's a play on It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
So I think Seymour is like he learns what life would be like without him, and it seems like it's just Mr. Mushnick and Audrey owning a yogurt shop, which I didn't understand.
Your guess is as good as mine. And yeah, so the ninth episode, the any copies that are out there by and large, at least available to the public, are really only these ones that were recorded. And the one only has a German version for some reason or another. There's English translations, but no actual English version.
I was also wondering if it was like, because I can't hear them, so I was wondering if it's supposed to be like a combination of It's a Wonderful Life and A Christmas Carol, because it's not an angel that's showing him what life would be like. It looks like it's the Ghost of Christmas Future.
Ah.
He's like a creepy floating ghost. Except I think it's supposed to be Junior, because it also has leaves and vines.
So this is kind of random, but I'm just looking here at this fandom wiki, and it just says characters frequently broke the fourth wall. Pop culture jokes were snuck in. They played Where's Waldo with Jack Nicholson. So it sounds like he was actually supposed to be put in there at random places, and if you play along to find him, I guess.
Huh.
Or
Well, I didn't know that, so I wasn't looking for him.
Neither was I.
And I don't really feel like watching the whole show again just to find him.
No, same.
That is
that's an
interesting,
point.
though.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. But it's one of those things with Wikipedia. You always got to kind of take it with a grain of salt. So.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised though. It makes sense, being that he was, the biggest thing to come out of the first Little Shop.
Yeah. Other than the musical.
Yes, very much. And this cartoon. Don't forget the cartoon.
Oh, of course.
One of my favorite puns was, with fronds like these, who needs enemies?
Yes. That's like, wasn't that something like in Finding Nemo, but it was with fronds like these, who needs anemones?
That's pretty good.
Something like that.
They also brought in so they had this parade, or it's like this fireman parade, and they had Orson Welles as the parade announcer.
Oh, that's what I was like, I thought they said Orson Welles, and I was like, is that Orson Welles? So I was looking it up, like, did Orson Welles do a voice in this? It was a pun, and I missed it.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right.
That's kind of hilarious, though. Orson Welles in a fireman's parade.
You also had tree puns in Pulp Fiction, like the beginning of that episode. I didn't write down specific ones, but those are pretty great.
Yes. I feel like there was one in Pulp Fiction. I'm gonna watch the beginning, because there was one that I was gonna make a note of and I forgot to write it down.
Oh, while you're looking for that, another funny one was at the dentist. He starts like Seymour gets out of the chair and escapes, and he talks about how he's losing patience, and then he also says, "I'm losing patience with my patients." And there was a couple of puns based on that were pretty good.
Oh yeah, here it is.
Lay it on me.
In the episode where they go to the forest because they're going to visit this old tree, like 1,000 years old, so he thinks he's going to talk to it. And they find out the forest has been fully cut down. And Junior says, "Why would someone commit such a horrible atrocity?" And he's like fully serious. It's like not supposed to be a pun, but it is a pun. And
Right.
then Seymour says, "I'm stumped." And they're surrounded by stumps.
Well, even the stew, like the veggie creature that they created that turns into a stew, is kind of a cute little play on words. And I mean, it does pay itself off to some extent. So of these episodes, which one did you like? Was there one that stood out as really good or really bad? I guess.
I don't know. I think they all had their good moments and their dull moments.
Very true.
I don't know if I have a favorite.
Any
they're
favorite
all kind
moments?
of they're all kind of equal. Well, favorite moments are some of the things we talked about, like some of the good puns, and
Yeah, true.
I thought it was weirdly funny, and I don't know why. I just liked that he actually ate somebody in the last episode. Too bad it had to be an innocent piano player, but
Yeah, it would have been better had he eaten the bully, but you know, all that metal and the braces. I mean, you don't want to get too much iron in your diet.
it could have damaged his throat stalk.
Yeah, they kind of went for broke in that final episode. I mean, oh, that was another kind of funny thing. So obviously, Mr. Mushnick has Audrey, but there's no mom on that.
Oh, that's
And
right.
They Audrey refers to her mom being lost, and actually surprising for that time, Seymour asks, when did she die? And Audrey goes, "No, we just lost her. We went to the mall one day and we couldn't find her. She just disappeared." We searched forever.
They don't seem that worried about it, though. Like,
No.
you would think they would have put out a missing persons report or something.
Well, you could say the same thing. How I mean, Junior basically does everything in front of everybody else, and yet never gets
Yeah.
caught. Like, he's undercover the entire time. The only time that he's even acknowledged is when they go out for Halloween. He's underneath a sheet, so he's a ghost. He's being pulled in a wagon by Seymour. I think they call him Bud.
Another pun.
Oh yeah, just a little bit. That's the thing. Like we talked about, there's some good stuff. Like it's not. If you just watch it's like watching a B movie. If you go in with the notion that it's going to be bad and you don't give it a chance, you're going to see what you want to see. There is a lot of cool stuff, but you have to actually watch it.
Yeah. I think what makes it harder with this one, though, is that there's 13 episodes.
Yeah.
So it is much more of a time commitment than just watching one movie.
Oh no, 100% agreed. That's why I'm very much a movie person and not a TV person.
Yeah, I mean, I used to always be a TV person, but I had a lot more time when I was younger.
Yeah.
And now it's like I'm so far behind on most shows that I watch. Like
I
the
feel you.
CW Arrowverse. Like, I was a huge Smallville fan back in the day, so I was so excited when they were doing more DC shows. And I don't know how many years behind I am on all of the shows. And it's
not
so
hard to
daunting
do.
to try and catch up on. And
Oh yeah.
not that, I mean, this is only 13 episodes, so it's not a good comparison, but that's still kind of how I feel about shows. Like, they have to be really good for me to like fully binge them and totally keep up with them.
Oh yeah. Well, and to pay the proper attention that it needs to be paid.
Yes.
And I feel you loud and clear.
That's probably why I don't do a whole lot of TV series for this podcast.
No, that makes sense. I mean, one season of 20-minute episodes is quite a commitment. I can't imagine like our like 30. Well, I don't even know if they make them that long anymore, but like however many of any season, however many hour episodes you might have to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, there's. Eventually, I'm going to be doing Treasure Island on this podcast,
Oh, nice.
and there's like several Treasure Island TV shows, and I'm just kind of. They're like at the back of my list. They'll be like, if this show goes on for many years, maybe I'll finally get to those one day, because some of them lasted a while. I think there's like a Treasure Island prequel series
Really?
that's like 4 seasons. And so,
Interesting.
as much as I am interested in them, it's such a huge time commitment.
A little bit. Yeah, definitely so.
This one, it was a time commitment, but it was slightly more doable, because even though it's 13 episodes, they're only 20 minutes, and they're on YouTube, so they have a double speed feature, so I could watch some of them really fast.
I was tempted to do the double speed feature, but I was worried I was going to miss something, so I was committed to this. So there could have been a pearl of wisdom in there someplace.
Maybe that's why I didn't understand some of the jokes.
Oh,
Like,
it's
I
all
didn't
right.
understand how some of them ended because I went by them too fast.
No, they ended just out of nowhere. There was no real. I mean, I don't think anything like they weren't that serious. That you weren't. They were just meant to be like it's almost anthology based. You got the same characters, but basically, like Seinfeld, nothing connected. You got the same characters, but everything was its own thing.
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't know if everything did it from that. I know that not everything did, but like, I don't know. So many shows of that era didn't really connect. It was just like, oh, well, hey, we're going trick or treating this week. And the next week, oh, we're going to school. Like, there was only one episode, no, maybe 2 episodes in school,
And then
which is
next week,
cool.
oh, we're
Fine.
only speaking German.
Yeah, exactly. By accident. One of those weird twists of history.
Maybe that's why we can only find it in German, because that's how they made it.
Exactly. Well, and of
It
all
was a
languages.
creative choice.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, God.
The children of 91 were very confused.
Oh, yeah. Well, and of all the languages, like, who would have thought German? Like, Spanish, I get. Even French, if you think it was, aired in Canada. But German?
Yeah, that is kind of a random language for it to be the only way it was preserved.
Right, exactly. I mean, there were some, like, Monty Python back in the day did an episode specifically in German because they had a very German audience at that point. But that was specific and done for that reason.
This is also a show for adults, too.
That's
I
true.
doubt this was a riff on Monty Python.
No,
Although
God,
if it was, that would be really funny.
that would be freaking hilarious if it was. But again, there are those little bits where it could have been. I mean, the Arson Wells, when I heard that, I cracked up.
I can't believe I missed that one. I thought they said Orson Welles, and I was like scrolling through IMDb trying to find if Orson Welles was in this show. Well, do you have any other thoughts of anything that we haven't covered yet?
I'm glad that they kept his look consistent, but I was really wishing he would change every now and again. Like just even his hat, it was like, dude, outfit one change, and that giant bow on the side of Audrey's head was it drove me nuts. I kept thinking that she had a pillbox hat on. Because they'd show her because the bow was kind of stuck to the one side of her head. So when they'd show her from the other side, it would just like the top of the bow would stick out and it looked like she had like this little hat on. And it's like, wow, that's interesting. And then she turns and it's this gigantic bow that's the size of her head. I was put off by that.
It's a very random thing to be upset about, but okay.
Yeah, I know. The careers for me were almost like I wrote down every career that she did, and I don't know why. It's like, okay, so she's gonna be an operator. She's gonna be, which the kind of operating she was doing was like, probably old school in the 50s. She was a housewife at one point because she didn't want her dad to marry pain drillers.
Malaclusia.
Yeah, she didn't want her dad to marry Malaclusia. It's like, okay, that's odd. Yeah, it just. The overwhelming want to be a fireman unless she wanted to be something else, which I mean at that age you would expect that, but it's such an odd story beat.
Well, I mean, I guess she's supposed to be 13, but I was going to say little kids, they have a lot of random wants to for their careers. Like
Yeah,
when I was
that's
little,
true.
I wanted to be a zookeeper and an artist. And I vaguely remember wanting to be on the radio too,
Nice.
which I guess I sort of am doing a podcast.
You're on the next version of a radio.
Yes.
Heard by anybody that wants to hear it across the world and into outer space.
Now, how can I become a zookeeper to fulfill that wish?
Well, you could find yourself a 200 million year old seed, plant it in wheat germ, and then have it come out with its own little pot.
I want to be a zookeeper, not a botanist.
Well, I mean, Junior is more animal than plant. He has a steady diet of meat.
I
He's
guess
not a
that's
cannibal.
true. His granny was a cannibal.
Well, and if his granny was a cannibal, chances are he is too. So where does this fall for you? Like, having talked about all three, the 60s movie, the 80s musical, and this. Like I know it's probably obvious, but being that we've gone through all three, where does each one sit for you?
This one is last.
Not surprised.
Then probably the 60s version, and then the 80s version is my favorite. But the 60s version is good, really good, in a totally different ways. I think the 80s version is my favorite just because it's the first one I saw, and it's just so weird and fun, and I love the music.
Oh yeah,
So
the music is amazing.
It's tops for me.
Oh yeah, I think that's awesome.
Is that the same for you, or do you favor a different one?
Well, I favor the cartoon. No, I'm kidding.
That would be really surprising.
Honestly, like the cartoon go before, I kind of dreaded doing the cartoon, honestly, because I didn't know. Having watched I previewed like a little bit of it, and it's like the animation is just the voice work is.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was surprising. It won't be something that I'll probably watch again, just because it's really not up my alley as far as interest. And I mean, I love the movies. They're both amazing. I'm glad to have added this to my repertoire of things that I've watched.
Yeah.
But I don't need to check it out again.
Yeah,
Having said
same.
that, if you do have a real interest in Little Shop, it is worth a watch just to see some of the weird background stuff, because there is a lot of cool little pop culture things. And because it was clearly done by someone that really, really, really loved Little Shop. I saw the musical first. I grew up on it. The music is like it brings you out of whatever bad mood you're in. You can be in any mood, and this will raise you. But for me, the 60s version is just so. It was a labor of love to get to enjoy it to the level that I do. Because the first time I watched it, I couldn't get what it was supposed to be. Like, I was so confused. I mean, for goodness sake, Seymour ends up in a toilet and pulls his head up out of the toilet. It was so over the top, but it was so much fun and weird. I think probably this, but only by the slightest of margins. And that was more because I had to put the time into rewatching it, and not that it was a labor or like a stressful thing. It was something that I wanted to do to understand more about it. So.
So your ranking is the cartoon, the 80s version, and then 60s your favorite?
Yes, but only by the smallest of margins with the 80s version.
Yeah.
I mean, it's by like a toe or like a nose or whatever. by a plant, by a leaf of grass.
Yeah. Yeah, they're both really good, but for completely different reasons. It's hard to rank them.
Agreed. Well, it was probably a goofy question to ask, but I figured I'd ask it.
No, it's worth it, especially with the two being so close. I mean, we're talking about this one, so it's kind of obvious that this one's going to be at the bottom, but... Agreed.
But again, props to them for the work that did go into this, because it was clear that, animation stuff aside, end of the day, it does have a lot that, it is distinctly Little Shop. You couldn't take these scripts, like you could take the basis of these scripts and put them elsewhere, but there's a lot of other stuff that were sprinkled in, like the little seasonings that gave it that distinctive feel.
Yeah, there's a lot in this that is very dependent on having watched the other two.
Right.
Which is weird that they made it into a kid's show, but like we've said multiple times, they did that a lot back then.
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, it's like Easter eggs in Marvel movies. If you know it, or in any movie, I guess. If you know the base property well, you can even say it, I guess, in video games. You know, if you watch a thing and you see something in the background, a character walks through, whatever, and you're able to identify it as something from some other part of that, franchise.
Mm-hmm.
That's something special for the fans.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess that's probably all we have to say about Little Shop. Unless you have any final closing thoughts.
I don't have any final thoughts, I'm pretty sure. So I appreciate you coming on this journey with me.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you doing it with me because, I mean, who else would I have gotten to watch 13 episodes of a weird cartoon about a man-eating plant who only ate one man at the very last episode?
Well, see, therein lies the thing. It's a man as in singular eating
Oh,
plant.
yes. Yeah, perfect.
That is a pun on the level of this show.
Yes, very much so.
It's either really smart or really stupid, depending upon how you look at it.
Yeah, that's certainly how a bunch of their little puns came off.
Agreed. They're eye rollers, but they're eye rollers with love.
Yeah. Well, until next time, do you want to let people know where they can find you?
Absolutely. You can find me inside the belly of Audrey 2 or Audrey Jr. or just Jr., depending upon how you want to state it.
Depending on which version you're in.
Exactly. At least it's distinctive,
Yes.
I don't think even then they would have gotten away with calling Audrey Jr. Audrey Jr. They probably would have had to call him Jr. Anyway, you can find me. You can find me here on YouTube at Trivial Theater. If you just type it in, and it's ER, not RE, because like the cartoon, I am just not that fancy. You can also find me on Twitter at trivia_chick.
Okay. I will have those linked in the description below.
All right.
Well, until next time.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Every Version Ever. If you like what you've heard, don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you prefer, and of course make sure to follow my co-hosts as well. Any relevant links will be in the description for easy access, and we'll see you soon for another brand new episode of the show. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Every Version Ever.